Hi, welcome to Chapter 16, Organizational Culture. This is an important chapter specifically for this course because we have a paper on culture that's going to ask questions about a company's culture of your choice. So you pick out a company and I want you to describe what the culture is, what causes this organization to have this particular culture, and can that culture be changed? So a lot of questions are going to revolve around information from this chapter and that paper. So after studying this chapter, you should be able to describe the characteristics of organizational culture, compare functional and dysfunctional effects of organizational culture on people and organizations, identify the factors that create and sustain organizational culture, show how culture is transmitted to employees, demonstrate how ethical culture can be created, describe the positive organizational culture, and show how national culture may affect the way organizational culture is interpreted. Okay, so what is organizational culture? It's a difficult thing to define and describe. I've worked with many different organizations, and all of them had slightly different cultures. I would describe, the best organizational culture is one that is welcoming, supporting, open, encouraging, and it's really difficult to find companies with such open-minded, broad, supportive cultures. It really takes an ambitious leader to foster such an organization. But basically, an organizational culture is a system of understanding that, and a system of doing things a particular way that's understood by the members of the organization that distinguishes it from other types of companies. So if you look at different companies you worked for, different companies you've been a part of, you can see that they have different cultures. I found that I worked for some companies that were big engineering and science companies, and they had a very innovative, supportive, educational-based type of culture. And I worked for some other companies that had a lot of employees that were minimum wage employees, non-college educated employees as the majority, and their policies, since these employees were more vulnerable, the policies were a lot more authoritarian, and the benefits were a lot more skimpy, cheap. So it seems like the culture can evolve a lot around the management and the employees. So if the management is far from where the base employees are, the culture can be a little bit more combative, a little bit more controlling, and where you have an environment where the managers intellectually, educationally, work-related efforts are not so far from the employees, such as an engineering company, you have a different culture where that chain of command isn't as important. Those are just some weak examples. So characteristics of organizational culture. There are 7 characteristics that would be good to look at and describe in your culture paper as far as the degrees to which you think the culture has these characteristics. So one would be innovation and risk-taking. Is the culture one that's supportive of people being innovative and risk-taking, like 3M? Attention to the detail. Is the organization one that is very have a high level of attention to detail? I know that when I was a teenager, I worked for McDonald's, and they had a very high attention to detail to how everything was done to keep a uniformity among all their locations across the world. Outcome-oriented. When I worked for defense and engineering companies, they were very outcome-oriented about what they were making, the products they're engineering, the results. People-oriented. Some cultures, I know at the university where I work currently, it's a more people orientation type of culture where we're interested in, it's a people business where we're communicating, teaching, educating people. Team orientation. I did work for companies that were, one particular company, the finance department was very team-oriented, working with the accounting department, working with other top managers, and preferring top employees to work in teams as equals rather than a more organized chain of command. Aggressiveness as far as a company culture. And when I worked for, a company where I hired majority of the employees were minimum wage factory workers, the culture was more aggressive, where the factory workers were aggressive towards each other as far as what was theirs and when they took breaks, and following the company rules, and the management was aggressive towards them, and it was a very hostile kind of environment of authoritarianism. And that's what happens when you have companies where you have a small amount of higher waged professionals who are working with and managing a larger minimum wage workforce, where there's a big divide between the perspectives of both sides, so they don't really know how to deal with each other as well. And then the stability, how stable is the culture? As far as a stable culture is one that is pretty well entrenched, pretty well understood, and doesn't change very often. So these are the 7 primary characteristics that you can use to define an organizational culture. And organizational cultures have a mix of these 7. Some, they're much stronger on one level and weaker on the other level. Okay, culture is a descriptive term, so we're trying to describe the organization. So if we look at culture versus job satisfaction, culture is concerned with the way employees perceive the culture or perceive the company, and whether or not they like it. And job satisfaction, in contrast, is an evaluation in nature and how employees respond to certain factors in their work. So job satisfaction is more about your feelings of your work and how you evaluate how well you like the job. But culture is more about the whole organization, how you perceive the organization, and how the organization functions as a group of people. So a good question to ask is, do organizations have a uniform culture? Now, most large organizations have both a dominant culture and several subcultures. So the dominant culture reflects the core values that are shared by the majority of employees in the organization, while subcultures reflect common problems or experiences shared by employees in the same department or location. So there is a dominant overall culture that's the core culture of the organization, but many departments or divisions of the company can have subcultures that can steer someone off track from the dominant culture, and sometimes a positive, but mostly in a negative way. So they can be similar to the dominant culture, but sort of modified. Okay, strong versus weak culture. So a strong culture is one in which the core values are intensely held and shared by most. And strong cultures will have great influence in the behavior of members and increase cohesiveness in the entire company, which should result in lower employee turnover. So a strong culture, the core values are understood and well believed and held by the employees. And the culture has a strong influence on the members. So once employees seem to feel more comfortable in the culture that's strong, so they really understand what the company is about and can decide whether it's right for them. And if they fit that culture, a strong culture is more stable, doesn't change as much, and it does lead to less employee turnover because of that predictability. Culture versus, just to say one more thing about this, if you have a weak culture and the culture's changing and drifting back and forth between different functions, then as an employee you might like the culture at one point, and if it's weak and changes into a different slides, into a different cultural aspect, you may become unhappy and then leave your job. So that's another reason for low employee turnover for strong cultures. So culture versus formalization. So formalization and culture are 2 different roads on a common destination. The stronger the organizational culture, the less management needs to be concerned about with developing formal rules and regulations to guide employee behavior. And those guidelines will be internalized in employees when they accept the organization's culture. So a high formalization creates a predictability and orderly consistency, and strong cultures achieve the same ends without the need for written documentation. So for example, one of the reasons the McDonald's culture was very strong is it was very formalized, and it was very predictable and consistent, and they had a lot of formalization in the process to help maintain that. But very stronger cultures where the employees are just aware, perceive, and ooze out the culture of the company, there's really no need to document every little procedure, because it's well understood what the company's going for and how you should behave and conduct yourself. So the function of cultures, now, when we look at this, when we talk about this, culture takes on distinct functions. So cultures define the boundaries between one organization and the others out there. They also convey a sense of identity for the members of the organization. If the cultures are strong, they can facilitate a continuous commitment to something larger than self-interest over an extended period of time. So cultures also help people know what to expect in the organization and can thereby enhance the stability of the social system. Cultures can also serve as a sense-making control mechanism for fitting employees into the organization. So culture is really good for setting these boundaries, conveying a sense of identity of what the company stands for, what they're trying to do, generate commitment in the company's efforts, and then just enhance the social stability of the company by people knowing their place, their role, and what they're supposed to be doing, and make sense of why you're there and what's trying to be done. So culture creates climate. So a person who encounters a positive culture for performance will think about doing a good job more often and will believe in supporting others for their success. Climates can also interact with one another to produce behavior. So climate influences habits. So the idea of companies working towards a very positive and supportive and stable culture is to create a shared perception about what the organization is trying to achieve. And this positive climate, if a positive culture develops where people are supportive and they want you to get ahead and they want to help you and they encourage you to do better for yourself and better for the company, creates a very strong results in the company. So companies that say, for example, I work for companies that are very supportive of education, providing tuition assistance, encouraging additional training, supporting you to going to different conferences for learning and improving your skills. And this builds a stronger culture because you feel like, okay, the company believes in me, they're trying to make me stronger, they're helping me to get educated. I want to give back to that company for them believing in me. And I've worked for other companies that are less like tuition reimbursement. Screw that. You don't need any more education. Less learning and more earning. Do some overtime if you have extra time on your hands. And that was the company culture, was like, education's stupid. Don't bother with that. And employees would basically feel like, I'm not getting anywhere here, professionally or personally. And that's why you get the higher turnover. Okay, so creating where cultures can be a liability. So cultures can also be a hindrance to an organization. A company can be institutionalized when people value the organization more than what they provide. So when cultures are strong, they can become a barrier to change, as their values may not align with the values needed to embrace or facilitate the change. Cultures may pressure employees to conform. It can be a barrier to hiring, developing, promoting a diverse workforce. So finally, a merger acquisition occurs, and one of the most difficult things is to merge the two cultures. So many mergers fail because of this culture clash. So like Time Warner and AOL were a complete failure as a merger. So a strong culture can be a liability when companies need to change their culture to adapt to changing times. So if the culture is so strong that it blocks employees from trying to change or improve the company and improve the culture, it can block, create these barriers to innovation, these barriers to creating a diverse or realistic workforce, to prevent bias and prejudice. And the culture can become incompatible with the current economic times and corporate realities. So sometimes some cultures that were strong and worked in the past don't always hold up moving forward into the future. So cultures start from the very beginning of the organization with the founders. So the founders are probably the most important aspect in developing the organization. And founders will tend to hire and keep employees who have similar views and work in a similar fashion. They'll also try to get employees to think things the way they do and socialize with them from the point of view of how to do things in their image. So this is done so that the founder's behavior will become the behavior model in order to succeed in the organization to fit in. So if you have a founder or a couple of founders and you work well with them, chances are you'll adapt to their culture. And then you'll hire people that will work well with you and adapt to the culture. So you can see how the culture spreads out from the founder. So the hiring and the indoctrination and the socialization all starts from the founder and the core people he works with. And this is why they're the most significant impact on culture and developing a culture for a company. And they're sort of the role model, and they're who encourage employees and who allow employees to look up to, and who allow employees to want to please. So you often change yourself in a way to fit into the culture of the company if you want to get ahead and you want to be liked and valued by the founder of the company. So how do you keep culture alive? Well, there's three main ways. The first is to find those who fit into the culture and hire them. The second is critical that top management establish norms of behavior and how they act. And finally, socialization into the culture helps keep new employees to adapt to the way things are done. So it's sort of selection of people who are going to fit in the hiring process. Top management establishing and maintaining normal actions and behaviors, and the socialization of the employees to help keep and foster the existing culture. And especially if the culture is an important aspect of the company and that something that the company wants to foster and develop, they have to keep an eye on these mechanisms for maintaining and keeping culture alive. So let's look at the socialization model. So the socialization process involves a few steps. The employee will learn about the organization through literature that the organization provides, interviews, and other people in the pre-arrival stage. So once the employees start interacting with other employees, the employee enters the encounter stage where he or she sees what the organization is really like. Expectations are measured against reality during this stage, and a misalignment may emerge. So during the third stage, metamorphosis, the employee adjusts to the organization and work. And then the outcomes are hopefully greater productivity, commitment, and lower turnover for the company. So the pre-arrival, the encounter, and the metamorphosis is basically, starting out, getting hired, meeting the coworkers, talking with them, socializing with them, and then changing yourself to fit, adapting your work behavior to fit into the company's culture so you can become a successful employee. So that would be the socialization model. So there are a number of possible socialization programs. Every organization needs to select one that best fits its culture. When the socialization process matches the organization's culture, it will have positive outcomes during higher productivity, greater commitment, and lower turnover. So new workers are separated for specific training. There are collective groups, fixed planning activities, role models and mentoring can be used. So in an informal way, new workers can be put to work immediately. The workers would be sort of individual work one-on-one rather than a collective group basis. The roles are sort of you're on your own. So there's really, there's the formal socialization process where the company can really lay out, this is how you're going to be integrated and assimilated into the corporation, and have a really formalized plan of how to socialize you. Or is a more informalized plan where basically it just happens and they create sort of an environment where this socialization is allowed to happen, but they don't put a number on it. They don't put a schedule with it. They don't create a budget for it. So those are just some examples. Okay, so a summary of how cultures form. Cultures begin with the founder of the organizations and continue through the hiring of people to see their similarities and they'll fit into the culture, and it's enforced through top management and socialization, and then the output is the organizational culture. So the success in employee socialization depends on management's selection of socialization methods and the closeness of new employees to value the organization. So companies that have a culture may have things, socialization events like they may have a monthly birthday party for all the employees' birthdays. They may have a company Christmas or holiday party, or a company picnic in the summer. They may have other events that give opportunities for employees to meet other groups or other departments or other leaders in the company. So there are many ways to kind of indoctrinate and get the employee to understand the culture and the expectations that the culture will put them into. So how do employees learn culture? So this is an interesting aspect, a different way of looking at it. So employees learn the organizational culture through a number of different ways. They can gain an understanding of the culture by hearing stories from the present, the past, provide explanation of current practices. So this is very important, hearing stories about how this company got started. He started selling items from the trunk of his car. He built the first computer in his garage. He got a loan from his parents, and he set up, started his small business with just 2 partners. Stories of trials, tribulations, overcoming obstacles in the beginning really set the tone for the culture. Also, stories about current leaders and people and actions they've done and things that were brave or sacrifices they made for the betterment of the company all build this culture. Also, rituals. Repeated sequences of activities can reinforce the key values of the organization and provide insight into the culture, such as routines as every morning the companies get together for a pep talk from the owner, or the companies, at lunch all go walking around the building, or the certain activities that are, maintained that help provide and reinforce a culture. Material symbols such as dress code, formal, informal, office size or style, perks for key employees can denote who is important in the organization, like parking spots, where is your parking spot assigned, having what type, size of offices, number of chairs in your office, number of artwork in your office. The dress code, how are you have to be, suits, business casual, business formal, just this can denote things as well. And language is another way to learn about organizational culture, as employees will express themselves in certain ways to indicate membership in the organization. The company may have certain phrases, certain catchphrases, a certain common language, dialects inside the company that are unique to how the company expresses themselves. How they, some companies may call you an associate rather than a clerk or a secretary, or, they may just try to have everybody named as an associate so you feel more in the collective and less designated by your job title. So creating an ethical and cultural, ethics in organizational culture. How do you create an ethical culture? So as cultures are created, it's important to incorporate ethics into cultural norms early on. And certain characteristics will help develop high ethical standards, such as a high tolerance for risk, so people are not afraid to make mistakes, and low to moderate and aggressiveness, so that unethical behaviors are avoided. And the focus is on the means as well as the outcomes, so the ethics are embedded in both. Managers must have a visible role model, be visible as role models, and communicate the ethics expectations to employees. So training on ethical behavior and guidelines must be done, and ethical acts must be rewarded while unethical acts must be punished. So in addition to protective mechanism, there must also be in place to assist workers in behaving ethically. So a lot of the ethics stem from the managers and the examples they set. So ethics really needs to be leading by examples. So if your culture, for example, I used to manage a chain of movie theaters, and there was one theater that had a lot of theft in it. So the problem was that the manager was stealing, things in front of regular employees. So they would see the manager taking candy or giving out free tickets to people, and they'd say, well, I'm going to do the same thing. If the manager's doing it, that's, how the culture is here. So once that manager was eliminated and the other managers were told to provide examples and to be on the lookout and and be punishing if people did, and fire people immediately, or take legal action if there was any theft or any wrongdoing, and leading by example, and showing employees that unethical behavior or theft or of services or merchandise or cash would not be tolerated, and setting an example. So if the manager set an example of being honest, being ethical, not gossiping, being supportive, describing the ethical expectations of the company, and providing training and support, you can create a more ethical cultures. And more ethical cultures are more profitable cultures. So it really boils down from the examples that the managers set. So it's really from the founder down to the directors, to the managers, to the supervisors. This ethics has to be reverberated like a wave throughout the company to reinforce ethical behaviors, because employees will really take cues from top management on what's ethical. And managers really need to do a good job of explaining to employees what's ethical, what's not ethical, what's acceptable, what's not acceptable, and why ethics matter, and why ethics make you, having a strong code of ethics and will avoid you from getting into a lot of trouble or bad situations that could lead to termination, and also make you feel better about yourself, that you're an ethical person and you don't take these unethical shortcuts, and make you feel more confident in your abilities. Okay. So creating a positive culture, and this is what real companies really are striving for, is a positive culture is one that builds on employees' strengths so that employees can develop and grow. So if you feel that organization has a really positive and supportive culture, that's going to help you grow as an employee, take risks, learn new things, improve yourself, and it also rewards more than it punishes. So employees are not afraid to try new things and feel good about what they're contributing. It finally emphasizes that individual vitality and growth, so that employees are operating at full potential. And the idea is that a positive environment culture is something that's going to work best. That we've all experienced positive cultures, even if we're working for a culture that you may not be sure of, there are positive aspects to every culture. So we do know, however, that all national cultures value being as positive as possible. And the U.S. takes a particular stance on being a more positive culture. So moreover, within the United States cultures, there are limits in how far companies should go. And these limits are indicated by the industry. But a positive culture is when you come to work and you feel good about your employer, you feel good about what the company's doing, you feel good that the company recognizes you, rewards you when you put yourself out there and you try to make growth, and they recognize your growth and they support it. And that makes you want to give back more and work harder. And it's sort of this synergy of effects when you have a positive culture on employees being happier and having more job satisfaction, you always need to feel like you're going somewhere in a company, that there's a chance for advancement, there's a chance for personal gain and personal development. And that makes you a better employee and the company a better company, quite frankly. I don't think anybody can argue with that. So global aspects of culture. So organizations' culture exists within a local culture, and this can't be ignored. So it's important that managers increase their ability to become more culturally sensitive through listening and adjusting communications to the culture in which they're operating and avoiding controversial topics in their discussion. So the management of ethical behavior is one area where national culture can rub up against corporate culture. So if you're a multinational company, you have to really understand when you're dealing with other companies or other customers from other companies that have different cultures, that you have to be culturally sensitive. So you want to talk in a lower, non-aggressive tone. You speak softly, you listen, you avoid potential topics such as religion and politics, and you learn about the other company's culture, you respect it, you honor it, and they'll take that will be a significant step forward in building trust between the two companies. That's why it's good that a lot of companies move their managers between different locations in different countries, so you can get an idea what the cultures are, and then as you work in cross-country teams within companies, you become more effective. So what are the implications for managers? Well, cultures begin with the founder, of course, we discussed that, of the organization, are very difficult to change once they become embedded. So in order to maximize employee outcomes, it's important to hire people who fit into the organization and help them become socialized and cultural and into the corporate culture. So managers can reinforce this through their actions. It can take a real long time to change your culture. So you have to realize that a culture is relatively fixed in the short term. So long-term change, top management really has to work hard at that. So hiring individuals that will align to your new culture and improve your current culture is really key. And understanding how employees perform and how they socialize to the degree that you want to foster and develop your culture through training and socializing your employees is an important aspect or mindset for managers. So if you want to shape your culture, you have to shape your work environment, you have to shape your employees to get them to understand your company's culture, and also how you can get them to understand where you're trying to change or adapt or improve your company's culture. But keep in mind, cultures develop over long periods of time. So as you think about culture, remember that organizational culture depends on employees' perceptions. And managers and founders and owners shape those perceptions. However, the ethical and positive organization cultures can be created, although methods may vary on how quickly and how much they can be ingrained in the employee. The national culture can influence the way cultures take shape based on the region that the company is, the majority of the employees are from. So you got to consider that while making a culture. So in summary, we described the common characteristics of organizational culture. We compared the functional and dysfunctional effects of organizational culture on people in the organization. We identified the factors that create and sustain organizational culture. We showed how culture is transmitted to employees, demonstrated how ethical culture can be created, described a positive organizational culture, and showed how national culture may affect the way organizational culture is interpreted in different countries. Okay, so that's it for this chapter, and I'll talk to you soon.